afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Daily Mirror Cost of Living Facebook Live session. My name is Levi Winchester, and I am a money reporter at the Daily Mirror. So for those who've never tuned in before, what we are doing is every Thursday at 1 p.m, we're covering a different money or general cost of living topic with the aim of answering as many of your questions as possible. So as always, if you have a question, drop it in the comments section below or email us at mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk and we'll do our best to answer you. So this week we're going to be talking about benefits, and I am joined by StepChange Debt Advice Policy Officer Andy Shaw. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy.
Hi, good to be here.
So it is estimated that there is a collective £15 billion worth of benefits going unclaimed each year, which is just a huge number. And obviously with the cost of living rising, it's more important than ever to know what you're entitled to. So Andy, to kick off, at StepChange, have you noticed a sharp rise in people inquiring about benefits?
So I think what we've seen over the last few months, particularly with the recent price rises in energy and fuel and food and so on, is people coming to us increasingly not having the money to meet all of their day-to-day living costs. And really part of our role is to look at what can we do to try and help them through that. You know, what alternative ways are there of making the money go further? And benefits is definitely part of that story. So are there things people are not claiming that they're entitled to, and can we use that to boost up their household income a little bit? So it's not necessarily that they're coming to us looking for benefits, but it's just about how they can make ends meet more generally, and benefits becomes part of the answer for them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what are the most kind of common benefits that you're finding that people are missing out on?
Yeah, so you gave the figure of £15 billion in the intro there, and that I think comes from a report by Turn to Us, the sort of anti-poverty and benefit experts. And their same report found that actually the most commonly unclaimed benefits are things like pension credit, so people who are above state pension age who are entitled to a top up on that, then pension credit, and also housing benefit. Again, if you're above state pension age, then you may be able to get help with your housing costs, normally your rent through your local authority. And again, an awful lot of that money is being left on the table by people not claiming it. For people of working age, then there are also large amounts of universal credit that go unclaimed. So that's money that people may be entitled to top up maybe low or insecure household incomes, and things like child tax credit as well. So all of these benefits that are potentially, life-changing for people in terms of the sums of money they might receive, are just not being claimed at this point.
I think as well, what we see a lot of through our readers at the Mirror as well is it can be quite confusing knowing what benefits you could be entitled to. So, I mean, broadly sort of speaking, who are the sort of people that should be checking what benefits they could be claiming? I mean, is it kind of low income people? I know you mentioned pensioners as well. What do you have a sort of like benchmark for where you would be like, you should check to see if there's anything you could be entitled to?
Yeah, so the way that the benefit system works is that your entitlement is based entirely on your own circumstances. So what age are you? What do you earn? How many children have you got in your household? What are the other people in the household doing? What are they earning as well? So it really is different for everybody. So actually, even if you think you're relatively comfortably off, you've got a good wage coming in, then it may still be worth checking out your eligibility. Clearly, if you are in one of those categories that I mentioned, lower incomes, insecure work, maybe there's only one wage earner in the household or somebody in part-time work, those are going to be more likely to be a result where you will get additional benefits. But actually, really, for anybody who is thinking about, how am I going to make ends meet during this time, then a benefit check could be a sensible thing to start thinking about.
And I know we touched on this previously just before we started, but you mentioned StepChange sort of seeing quite a worrying gap in the length of time it takes people to sort of start looking for help. I mean, do you think that's something that's going to continue sort of with the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully things like this, where we're trying to talk to people about that, the sorts of steps that they can take to help them, and lots of other work that's going on in kind of the media and public affairs space to make people aware of this is actually going to help. But you're right, what we found previously in our research is that people wait on average 12 months of being under real financial pressure before they start thinking about seeking money or debt advice. So that's 12 months of potentially missing bills, of not being able to put enough food on the table, of all of that stress and pressure, and people not knowing or not appreciating that there's help available. So yes, as the cost of living crisis goes on, that may well continue, and therefore we will get lots of people who are waiting until a real crisis point before they start to seek help. But what we're hoping is that actually people will realise much earlier that there are things that can be done and start reaching out sooner.
Yes, of course. I think especially as well when you consider, like energy bills will likely rise. At least that's what the experts are predicting later this year. Yeah, it's absolutely important for people to seek help, sooner rather than later. It's just going back to benefits and the ways to kind of top up your income to help with this. How do households check what benefits they could be entitled to?
So there are a number of tools that will actually help you calculate your benefit eligibility, if any. Lots of different sort of online calculators. There's one on our website, stepchange.org. There are lots of very similar ones out there as well. And really, if you're not sure where to start, then something like that is a really good place to begin, because you can enter in your details, all of those things that I mentioned before: who's in your household, how old are they, that kind of thing. What's your approximate income, and you'll get an idea of not only the amount that you could claim, but also what benefits you're entitled to as well.
How long, kind of roughly speaking, would it take to fill in one of these calculators? I mean, is it quite a reasonably kind of quick, straightforward process?
Yeah, so the calculators are designed to be quick and easy, indicative tool of what you can claim. So I mean, as with any of these things, the information you get out is only as good as what you put in. So if you have all of those details to hand, then it can be a very quick and easy process, and you get quite an accurate result. But you're talking minutes. You're not talking hours. Let's put it that way. We're not saying that you need to spend hours online researching what you're entitled to before you even get to the point of making a claim. These calculators will give you a very quick and easy result in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens, say, once you filled in one of these online calculators and it comes back and says, you should be eligible for X, Y, Z, what happens then? Do you have to manually apply for the benefits yourself, or will the calculator do this for you? I mean, if we could talk through the kind of process of what happens next.
Yeah, so generally speaking, you would be told what you can apply for, what you're entitled to, but then in terms of actually going on to make the application, that wouldn't be sort of seamless from the calculator itself. It would just be a case of making the application to the Department for Work and Pensions in the case of most benefits, or your local authority if, as I say, you're over pension age and you're looking at housing benefit, for example. So with universal credit, which is the benefit that most working age people would be claiming, that is all online, the application process. So you would go onto the gov.uk website and begin making your universal credit claim. Other benefit types, such as the housing benefit, that would be your local authority, and their processes may vary. But certainly a lot of the calculators will at least point you in the direction to get started. So they'll say, this is your local authority. Here's the page on their website that deals with housing benefit, and that will tell you how to apply. That would be the kind of the minimum that you should get from one of these online calculators.
Just going to jump to a question we've just had coming from one of our viewers, from Sarah Kemp. I'm on universal credit and I'm still finding it hard to keep up with my bill. Is there any other benefits I can get?
So Sarah, as I said before, actually your precise entitlement depends on your exact circumstances. But if you're receiving universal credit, it is still possible to go onto a benefit calculator or some other tool and just check that you're receiving the right amount, because just because you're already on universal credit, it doesn't mean that you're getting the right amount. Okay, it could be that actually there's parts of your entitlement that have been missed. So using that can be a really good indicator of whether or not you're getting the right amount. And then, if if what you're claiming is not enough to cover your bills, then that could be a sign that you need other help. For example, debt advice through an organisation like StepChange. So, coming to somebody like us and allowing us to have a thorough look at your finances, so not just your benefit income, but your expenditure as well, and any debts that you might owe, and think about a way of dealing with your finances in more detail. That would be a really good place to start, I think.
Would you recommend as well, if someone is struggling to keep up with their bills, just to talk to their providers as soon as possible, as well as the kind of first measure, just to make sure they don't fall behind and they get the help that they need as soon as possible?
So that can be a really good step. Yeah, absolutely. If it's just one or two bills that you're struggling with, then actually speaking to those people can make all the difference, in terms of them giving you more time maybe to sort something out, or pointing you in the right direction of things that can help you. There comes a point, I think, where it gets a bit overwhelming. If you're behind on your rent, your council tax, your utility bills, all your credit cards, and your bank overdraft as well, all of that sort of thing, then it can very quickly become quite overwhelming to deal with all of those people separately, and that's where, again, debt advice can help. So it's really about your own situation and whether or not you feel comfortable making all of those calls yourself.
No, absolutely. Just to jump back to our conversation there about benefit calculators. So once someone has applied for a benefit, how long would it normally take for the money to start coming through? I mean, obviously it varies kind of hugely depending on what type of benefit you are claiming, but is there a kind of rough sort of guideline of how long it could take for, say, universal credit or pension credit? Does some take longer than the other?
Yeah, some do take longer than others. Certainly the kind of sickness and disability related benefits, they can take that little bit longer, because there is the process of having to verify, medical information and so forth to check eligibility. Universal credit, quite famously, there is a 5-week wait. So once you have made your claim for universal credit, then you have to wait 5 weeks before you get paid. That's not because that's how long it takes to process your application. That's just built into the system as to how long it takes. And then your local authorities, your housing benefits, then again, you're looking at a similar sort of time frame, really, in order from making your application to getting your first payment.
Absolutely. And for anyone who is struggling to use an online calculator, what should they be doing next, and who should they be speaking to work out what they could be entitled to?
So your best bet in that case, if you are unable to access or use the online calculators, you're struggling to make them work, or you think your situation is maybe just a bit too complicated for a calculator online to give you an accurate result, then really that's a case of needing to seek advice. So most local authorities will have welfare benefits advice available, either in-house from one of their own teams, or they will have a local advice agency who provide those services on their behalf. So if it's benefits advice that you're looking for, then I think your local authority is very often a good place to start.
Is this something that StepChange would be able to kind of help with as well, if people were to get in contact with StepChange about help with benefits?
So our service is predominantly debt advice. So what we do in terms of welfare benefits is we can help you identify what sort of benefits you might be eligible for. But in terms of actually going through the process of applying, then that's where more specialist welfare benefit advisors would come in. So it really depends on what kind of help you're after.
Oh, absolutely. And what, aside from benefits, what other support could households be applying for right now, particularly if they're already falling behind on bills due to the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point, actually, because quite a lot of the people who are going to start feeling the effects of the cost of living crisis are maybe not necessarily going to be entitled to much in the way of extra benefits. Clearly, as we've said, there are huge amounts of benefits going unclaimed, and it's very important that everybody checks their eligibility. But what if that's not going to help? What if that's something that's not open to you? So again, local authority is a good place to start. Most of them have kind of welfare assistance or hardship schemes that will allow people access to things like grants or to vouchers for food and fuel banks, those kinds of things that can help cover kind of one-off emergency costs. You also have for things like your utility bills, which everybody's very worried about at the moment, your gas and electricity, you may be able to get grants for things like more effective insulation or boiler repairs, that kind of thing, which might seem like it might seem like something that you're not really thinking about at this point when you've been hit with this huge gas or electricity bill and you're wondering about how to pay it. But in terms of keeping the costs of that down in future, then actually investing in or getting grants and support for things like insulation and so forth can actually be really helpful in bringing down those costs and making them more manageable.
No, absolutely. We've just had another comment here from Lee Rob. It says, I'm still on job seekers and not in good health. I get the minimum on PIP, personal independence payment, and being pressured to go back to work. I can't manage this. I don't know whether to eat or heat. I can't afford transport, and I'm unable to get to the nearest bus stop 1 mile away. I mean, what sort of what next steps would you recommend for Lee?
Yeah, so Lee's situation, I mean, I think unfortunately is not all that uncommon among the people that we speak to. You know, they get a fairly minimal amount of benefit, and maybe they're not able to increase that through employment or through through increasing their income in other ways. So that's why we recommend getting advice in those situations. So speaking to a welfare rights expert to understand, are you receiving the right amount of money first and foremost, and actually how can you make that go as far as possible? Because clearly when you're in a position like that, having to choose between heating or eating, then that's incredibly difficult for people and not sustainable over a long period of time. So that's why I encourage people to get help as early as possible and look at what we can do to try and make that money go a little bit further.
Just had another response from Lee as well, saying that he can't afford to pay back grants. Like so, says grants are no good, can't afford to live, let alone pay the money back. But I think what's really important for people to know is that obviously if you're getting a grant, you shouldn't need to pay the money back. Obviously, if it's a loan, then you would do. So is it right in saying that, there are a lot of grants out there for people who need the help?
Yes, definitely. And you're right to make that distinction. Absolutely. So some organizations may offer loans, and as you say, Lee, you do have to be very careful about taking a loan even on an interest-free basis, because you do have to think about how you're going to pay it back. But a grant should be non-repayable, so it should be just a sum of money that you're entitled to, and that then you can use in the way that you need and not have to worry about paying that back.
And just to kind of cover that point again, where would people be able to find what grants are available to them?
So there are a number of different places. As I mentioned a little bit earlier on, most local authorities will have some form of crisis grant or welfare support scheme, and they're a really good place to understand what's available in your area, not just on the basis of what they can help you with directly, but also what other schemes might be in operation near where you live. In addition to that, the big utility firms also have generally charitable trust funds that they're associated with, and they may be able to help you with, for example, paying off big energy bills or with replacement white goods, that kind of thing as well. So there are a number of places that you can go to look for that kind of help, and hopefully in those cases you will be able to get the support that you need, whether it's from your local authority or elsewhere.
Absolutely. What I'd like to just briefly sort of touch on now, as I know we haven't got oodles of time left, is the other help that you can get, or the other discounts rather, when you are on benefits. So for example, there are a lot of major telecoms companies that are doing like social tariff broadband packages that start from around £10. Is there any other kind of discounts or even sort of freebies that you kind of would think of and would recommend to people on benefits, Andy?
Yeah, so social tariffs, actually, but you mentioned that term. That's a really important one. So it's not just your telecoms, your broadband and so forth, which, as we know, are increasingly important, particularly if you're in a situation like Lee, where you're having to job search. You need to be online, so getting that as cheaply as possible is a no-brainer, really. But also the utility companies, so gas, electricity and water, also have social tariffs, which are very often open to people who are on low incomes or on benefits. So that would allow you to pay a lower amount for those kind of critical bills, which, as we all know, everybody's very concerned about at the moment. So certainly if you are in that position, then speaking to your providers about any sort of social tariffs or any additional support that's available to you is a really good idea.
I'm just going to bring up a comment here as well, actually. It's really interesting. Is it only universal credit you can get milk tokens for babies with, as it's what I've been told? So what sort of help is there for mums?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I'm afraid I don't actually know the answer to the specific question about milk tokens for babies, because, yeah, there are universal credit is what you would get if you entered into the benefit system now for the first time. So if you made a claim for benefit, then you would be put onto universal credit. There are other benefits which are generally called legacy benefits, which existed before universal credit, which some people might still be on. And some of the features for universal credit are not always reflected in legacy benefits. So I don't know about that one specifically, but that's where a welfare rights advisor would be able to help you to identify actually, what's going to make you better off. If you're on legacy benefits, would you be better off moving to universal credit and having some of these additional kind of perks that are available to you, for want of a better term, or would you actually be better off staying where you are? So that those kinds of situations are where it's important to get advice, I think.
That's an interesting point you made as well about people on legacy benefits moving over to universal credit, because that migration process obviously is going to start up again later this year. I mean, are you seeing a lot of people coming to StepChange sort of worried about that? Are you having to give them advice, or advice they go to a welfare expert? Is this something that people are kind of worrying about at the moment?
I think people are definitely worrying about it, and the kind of the nature of the work that we do is that we're always looking into the future. What are your sort of changes to your income, your expenditure, etc. are you expecting over the near future? Because that will impact on the advice that we give you, because clearly there's no point in us setting you up on a particular payment plan for your debts, for example, if in 6 months' time you're not going to be able to afford it. So the migration to UC for those people who are on legacy benefits is a big unknown for a lot of people, because they just don't know, are they going to be better or worse off after that has taken place? So what that means for us is having to think about the shorter term a lot more. What can we do for you in the here and now, and then we can reassess once that has taken place. So it's creating an awful lot of uncertainty, but we're trying to deal with it as best we can.
And am I right in thinking there are some online calculators also available for that will tell you whether you are going to be better off on universal credit or worse off? Is there a way for people to start looking at that?
Yeah, so very often the sorts of online calculators that we were talking about a little bit earlier on, they can help you with a sort of a better off calculation as well, so you can understand whether you'd be better off staying put or making the move.
Fantastic. I think that should just about cover everything. I think that we planned on talking about. I think for me, I think the main sort of message I think is so important to kind of hammer home to people at the moment, particularly talking with someone like yourself, Andy, who works for a debt advice agency, is just to talk to people, talk to your utility providers, and just get help as soon as possible. Because I think what you said earlier about it taking 12 months for people to get the help they need, that's such a long time. And yeah, I think just if people talk and get the help as soon as possible, that's only a good thing.
Definitely, yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that's the message that we want to get across to people, is that the help is out there, and that you don't have to wait until you're at absolute crisis point to seek it out. The sooner you get help, the more options there will be available for you. So we'd encourage people to do it as quickly as possible. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Andy. Really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, we'll be back next Thursday at 1 p.m. for another Facebook Live session. So hopefully see you then. Thank you so much.